Bob, since you were playing Vanilla Ice, it reminded me, since your mom's coming in town for Easter next week, I thought I would hire Vanilla Ice to help teach her some Microsoft Office, so he could teach Word to your mother. Get it? Word to
That's
your
bad.
mother?
That's bad, Paige.
I
Yeah,
know, it's
that's
terrible.
funny.
All right. So thank y'all for filling out the poll. It looks like you want to know all the things. So we will see what we can do next week with
On
that.
the 25th, yes.
All right.
So Paige and I are on I-45. We're in the car. We're driving along, stuck in traffic, and we're a bit anxious because we want to get back and help a friend who had a really big problem. I look down as my phone rings, and it's someone that I haven't heard from in about 4 years. Actually, it's somebody I haven't heard from since my last high school reunion, as my 30th high school reunion is coming up this September. I was shocked that it was, again, a classmate from high school. Paige was in the car, so I put it on speaker, and I proceeded to hear probably the worst sales call I have ever heard in my life. My friend has been an insurance salesman now for, again, going on about 20, 25 years. And it was the day of the dread show. And we were coming back because a friend of ours' roof had torn off. And in that call, I said, again, we had a huge storm in Houston. We're racing back. We're trying to help our friend. And he proceeds to tell us that he's in insurance and talks about himself in insurance. Paige and I are on I-45. So again, we don't have much else going on. So we're happy to listen for a while, but we both look at each other and we're like, a little bit of WTF is going on, because again, all we're hearing is he's in insurance and what he's selling. The kicker is that the type of insurance that he sells is not actually the type of insurance that helps people when their roof gets ripped off. And he proceeds to talk about himself. We hang up the call, we look, and we laugh at each other. And in that moment, we not only recognize that that was a horrible sales call, but we recognize that we're still making the same mistakes. And so today we are getting back to some fundamentals on how you are able to add the most value possible in your meetings. So when you're with your sellers, they don't look at each other after you leave and be like, that was an absolutely horrible call.
Yeah, I'm hiring Vanilla Ice instead.
I'm hiring Vanilla Ice instead to teach my mom Word. So the question is if that's a really bad sales call, what does a really good one look like where you're actually able to add value? And obviously today we're getting really practical. We've got 4 specific tips for you. But before we go through them, we're outlining what are the things that you really need to demonstrate to your client in that meeting. And again, it's simple, but it gets lost a lot.
Yeah, and guys, for those of you on the call on our team, the reason we are reteaching these traits is because we are seeing that across the board, not only on our team, but also from what we're hearing in the community, is that this is a consistent pattern of behavior that real estate agents need to break, including our team on this call. So that's why we're rehashing through this. While some of you know this information, we probably just need to take root a little bit further.
Because again, we've seen mistakes. So the question again is what do you need to demonstrate to your clients? So what are the big things that you're looking for where you're able to add value? Number 1 is that you have systems, is that you are not a fly-by-night real estate agent who comes in and wings it, because when people are looking to maximize their largest asset, they want to know somebody has systems and processes. Number 2, your clients want to know that you're competent, right? That you have done this before recently for someone like me. Again, competency is, have you done this before recently for someone like me? And number 3 is that you are accountable to do the things that you say that you're going to do.
Seems pretty cool.
Paige, anything you'd add here? Yeah, right. Not rocket science, but sometimes the fundamentals get lost.
And again, this is how you define what a professional is, right? I have systems, I know how to do my job, and I'm accountable to do the things that I say that I will do.
So you get back to is, okay, what is the number 1 mistake? If you boiled it all down, what is the number 1 mistake that agents are making when they have a conversation with sellers that is strategic about what they should do. Maybe I move, maybe I don't, maybe I need to change my lifestyle, maybe I need to go live in Florida, right? What is the number one mistake that agents are making in a seller strategy session? And the answer to that is giving an ego-based presentation. And again, Paige, what's so bad about an ego-based presentation?
Well, heck, I've certainly given them, so I should know this better than anyone. And we're going to talk about things that I certainly have made mistakes in throughout my career. An ego-based presentation is I go in to meet with someone and I talk about me and what I do and how great I am and why I'm the best. And they sit there as if they are in a theater production and get to see the Paige show. And it's not about what is important to them. And ultimately, what you're trying to establish is this a partnership that works for both parties? And if I spend all my time trying to relate to them how great I am, how much I know, how smart I am, what my experience is, what are my awards, then I haven't actually taken the time to learn what's important to them. So I can't really solve their problem.
Wait, but Paige, but you said a second ago, it was really important that clients realize that you have systems and that you're competent. And again, you've done this before for people like me. So they need to know those things, again, to figure out who they want to hire, but it shouldn't be an ego-based presentation. How are you able to solve the problem to convey the information, but not, again, to give an ego-based presentation?
That's a great question. I think we're going to cover that in the next couple of slides.
Obviously, the big part is win before you arrive. 4 really simple steps. And again, for anybody who has put this into practice, because we adopted this as an organization about 18 months ago, and we saw about a 15% uptick in our ability to add value. And when those clients say, yep, I absolutely want to hire you, through 4 incredibly simple steps.
And for our agents that did implement this, they had a higher conversion rate with the sellers because it was a win-win for both sides as a result. For our agents that didn't put this into practice, they didn't see the same conversion rate. So we do have data that supports that perhaps these 4 simple steps actually work.
At about a 15% improvement in conversion. So if you're winning about 2 out of every 3 you go on, now you can win about 3 out of every 4 you go on because you're actually adding value in that meeting. Mm-hmm. Again, step number 1, trivially simple. Immediately after you get off the phone with someone and you've set an appointment for the time where you're going to have a seller strategy session to talk about them, send an email and a calendar invite. Now, Paige, again, I know this is probably pretty complicated, but what should that calendar invite say?
Well, first of all, the reason you have to do it immediately is that if you let time go by, you will forget. And it might end up on your calendar, but it may not send a calendar invite to them. And by showing that as soon as you get off the phone that information goes out, it means you are top of mind. They are top of mind to you. You care about them. And you're showing that you're accountable, that I really have an appointment with you. And the invitation is something very simple, strategy session, their name and Paige Martin with the Houston Properties team, this address, this time, and this date. Our strategy sessions, we usually set just about an hour because we don't really need to go have afternoon tea with them. Exactly. And they don't want that either because this is a chance for us to get to know them, not a chance for us to camp out.
The easiest thing to say here is, thank you for inviting us to discuss the sale of your home. We look forward to seeing you on Tuesday, April 22nd at 3 p.m. at 123 Main Street. Really easy. Again, for those professionals that are working, right, they are used to getting calendar invites from their boss and from teams and from other people they're talking to, and it sets you apart as a professional.
And if you aren't on their calendar and you rely on them to remember or put it on their own calendar, that's where things kind of can go awry because they're busy professionals as well. And so you're helping them push the easy button, which is something we want to do as professionals, so that it automatically gets onto their calendar.
Number 2 is easy. We spent a lot of time on this about a month ago on the importance of having your pre-listing presentation where you are able to provide some of that information, some of that ego-based information, because if you provide it in advance, you don't need to cover it as a presentation when you are face to face. Paige, anything else you'd add to the?
Yeah, I mean, right, we deliver our meeting materials for not only that, so I don't have to go in and say, look at me, look at me. They can read it. They're smart people. They know how this works. But it also allows them, especially for folks who may want to take more time to understand what your offerings are, that they need a little more time to absorb it. They can read it in advance and then they come prepared for the meeting. But every executive that we know doesn't walk into a meeting where they are presented with a surprise. They are presented with the information in advance so they can prepare, look at it, establish their questions, and then have a dialogue. So our goal to be respectful, to show that we're systematic, and to show that we're accountable, and that we are competent by presenting this information in advance, you're putting yourself as a like to one of their peers at work. And that's real important if you want to be seen as a professional.
Actually, Paige, that brings up a great idea. For the times that you are selling to professionals, your pro tip to differentiate you from everyone else is you send the box with your pre-listed information to their work. And the reason it's so important to send it to their work is when they get a big gift box and they get a whole bunch of printed materials that are quality, and they're walking through their office and their colleagues turn around and they're like, what do you mean you got a gift? What's your gift?
Well,
And
let me also, though, add there on the pro tip, you need to say, I have my marketing material. I'd like to send it to you at your office so I can ensure that you receive it and that your porch pirates don't steal it. They may not want their office mates to know they're selling, so you want the permission to send that first.
but yeah, but when you're there and you do get that permission and people turn around and they say, what do you mean you got a gift? Who's that from? Their answer is easy. My realtor. Number 3, again, one day in advance, send a text. Text is very simple, right? This is a reminder of our appointment tomorrow to discuss the sale of your home. We look forward to seeing you at 3 o'clock at 123 Main Street.
Right. Most of us are used to receiving text messages from service providers, right? I get a text message from my hair salon a day in advance saying, it's time to come in and fix your grays. Are you coming? Yes, I am. Great. That's what we're used to. I have one service provider that I utilize who doesn't do this, who doesn't call me to remind me. And the amount of times that I've actually missed or forgotten about the appointment is probably 50%. So it's a very simple automated step where you say, this becomes, and what you want to do, guys, is add this as a reminder on your calendar so you don't forget to do it.
And again, the last one, the one that also really separates you out, is you send a video text message the day of, 4 hours in advance. And on that video text message, you have differentiated yourself from 95% of all people. Mm-hmm. Now, the question is why don't we have a video here and why do we have a picture of Holly? Holly does a brilliant job of sending video text messages. If you would like a sample of a video text message that goes out in advance of a meeting, please let us know. And Holly said she'd be willing to share what that looks like. But your script on this, again, is super simple. It's you talking to your phone. You don't need to look perfect, but it's right. Good morning. We're really excited to see you at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Please let me know if you have any questions about the guide that we sent. We're really excited to start by learning more about your needs, goals, and timings. And Paige, what do you do when you're able to set up the appointment by saying we're there to listen?
Well, it sets the expectation that we are there to have a conversation and we are there to learn about what is most important to the client. When we put the client first, we're not only providing the fiduciary duty that we're required, but it sets the tone for a partnership and a different type of relationship. And that is what is most important, where you are not the salesperson coming in. You are a professional coming in to help the client make wise decisions. And it sets you in a way to be received differently. And why that is important is that if you do not treat this relationship as a partnership, you will find that there is friction along the way and that client ultimately may not be happy with your services. And that's a lose-lose for both parties.
Yeah, and just as Paige said, it was right. These simple steps before you arrive, that take less than a half an hour of your time is they demonstrate that you're organized. They demonstrate that you're proficient, right? Most realtors don't do this, but as Paige says, most doctors' offices do, right? You're in the category of a proficient professional, and also that you do what you say you're going to do, +1. Because most people don't get video text messages, and calendar invites. But this is how you demonstrate your organization, proficiency, and accountability before you walk in the door.
I mean, candidly, if our financial advisor would do this, we would be like, well, if he does this, I'm sure that whatever he's trying to tell me is going to be right because they're organized and they're proficient and they're making the most of my time and they're treating me as a professional. So I'm like, yeah, I trust this person. When it's willy-nilly and we hope that we're all on the call or the meeting at the same time and we're scampering around, it does not lay the foundation for you to be a professional.
Oh, Paige, it feels like we're going to bring that story back in just a minute. Okay, so again, big takeaways. Don't do the ego-based marketing presentation, right? Presentations are bad. Ego-based presentations are worse, right? Nobody wants to sit through a lecture. Number 2.
Kind of like we're doing right now.
A simple 4-step process will develop trust and rapport and will demonstrate those 3 capabilities much better than you telling them that you're organized, you have systems, and you're accountable, right? It's always more important and more powerful to demonstrate that than just to say it.
Yeah, because if you show them, then they believe you. If you tell them, they will be skeptical.
Paige, again, client first discussion, because you've opened the door that we are here to listen. And if you were there to listen, you're going to be much more likable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so once you're at the meeting, right, what are the 3 big things that allow you to have a great trust-based conversation? Because, right, you've already set up the win before you arrive.
Mm-hmm.
Paige, why is number 1 listening?
Well, when you go to a doctor's office, do they start by saying, the form says you're sick, and then they start to tell you all the things that you need to do? Well, they don't know what you're sick with. So don't they start by saying, tell me your symptoms. How long has this been going on? What happened before? What did you eat? Are you allergic to anything? Are you stressed? Did you go out and party all night?
Have you recently had surgery?
All of the things, right? And so they're asking a series of questions that allow them to listen to be able to give a diagnosis. As agents, we feel the need to because we're nervous most of the time, because we haven't taken the time to actually practice our skills enough to say, I need to listen before I talk. We go in and ask one question, and then we're like, great. They said they wanted to sell their house. I listened. Okay, let me tell you what you need to do. But we don't actually understand why they want to sell their house and where they're going next and what that timing means and what happens if that timing is not met and why it's important for them to net the most money or not, or why it's more important that they have a stress-free process or not. Right? So until you take the time to ask questions, then you can't really listen. And then you set this back to a position of having an ego-based conversation where you have dead air and you're like, I don't know what to do next. So let me just talk about me and what I do.
Okay, Paige, everybody wants to hear you role play this in just a second.
I just did.
But the build on this, right? Of the 3 things, number 1, listening. Number 2 is still listening, right? Number 2, it says learn, but ultimately it is listening to learn. Paige, you had alluded to this a second ago, right? We had another recent call from a current financial advisor. What was so bad about that discussion?
So we had a Zoom set up. We did get a calendar invite for the Zoom, but no reminder. So we scrambled around and said, are we having this? Or are we not? Okay, I guess we'll hop on. No information was presented in advance. It was supposed to be a year-end review as well as a conversation of what our financial goals were for the future year, of what we were trying to achieve and some decisions we were looking to make. And that's not really how the conversation went.
How did it go, Paige? Because again, start at the beginning. I think there were at least 2 or 3 questions, right? There was a listening component that felt perfunctory, but what was the difference between listening and learning?
So my favorite part of the conversation, and it took me a while to get there, but when you start really learning how important it is to listen, then you see it when it doesn't happen. And so in the conversation, Bob says something to our advisor, which essentially says, "Hey, buddy, we're off track a little bit. What I really want to make sure you understand is our goal is blah." Yeah. We'll get to that. And then he went on about something else, like squirrel. And then Bob said it again. "Okay, great, but look, I've got 30 minutes here. What I really want to make sure we cover is blah blah blah." Yeah, well, okay. And then we went off on another tangent. We did that 3 times. And then I got a text message from Bob that says, "I'm off this call."
I'm out. I've completely checked out, and we will be sending no money to this financial advisor because
Because he
he
didn't listen and he didn't learn. And when Bob tried to actually have the conversation, he cut us off so that he could tell us what he wanted us to know. And I can tell you in my career, I am certainly guilty of doing this, and probably every single one of us on this call is as well. The learning and the listening part is 2/3 of what that appointment in the house needs to be. If you are talking more than 1/3 of the time, you have done it wrong.
well, Paige, it also kind of feels like part of this learning component builds into why when somebody asks a question, right? They say, "Hey, what matters most?" and they give an answer. And then you come back with advice, or in a situation like when we're married and I come back with advice, why are there times that you would get angry with me?
Well, I think it's a bigger question, right? It's the emotional versus practical conversation. And we presented this to our team in October, and many of us have been still working through it. Um, it this is the crux of why dialogues go awry in real estate. Um, think of yourself, a lot of you are parents on this call, and you tell your child, "Hey, don't stick your fingers in the sockets." I mean, you may not have to say that anymore because you've childproofed your homes, but back in the day, your parents said, "Don't put your fingers in the sockets, and for goodness sakes, don't put the pencil in the socket." And some of us put the pencil in the socket, and it blew up in our face. And we started to cry, and we were upset, and we were hurt. And there's 2 ways that the parent handled this. Some parent immediately went to you and said, "See, I told you not to put the finger in the socket. That's why you got hurt." Some parents gave the child the time to cry and mourn and hurt, and then use it as an opportunity to have another conversation about why we don't put our fingers in the sockets. Right? Same thing happens when we're, teenagers. Your parents say, "Probably shouldn't date him. Let's not do that." And you date that person, and then you have a terrible breakup, and then you cry and you grieve. And does your parent say, "Told you not to date him"? Or does the parent give you a hug and say, "Baby, it's okay. Sometimes our hearts gets broken. What did we learn from this experience? Let's move forward." And then this theme carries on our entire lives, to where when I'm frustrated and I come home and I want to vent to my partner, and I'm venting and he wants to fix it and
It
tell
works out
me
well. It works
how
out really
how I
well.
can make it better, I'm out. I don't want you to fix it in that moment. I want you to hear me. And then once you've heard me and I've expressed my feelings, then at that point, I can move forward with a practical conversation. What happens in real estate is we're afraid of the emotional conversation. So we start with practical and we end with practical because we're trying to be professional. I get it. That makes sense. But could it be possible? I mean, how many on this call have ever had an argument about money in your household? Probably most of us. Could it be possible that money is actually something that is an emotional trigger? So it's very equally possible that when we're talking about somebody's money and their house and the place that they have raised their family, that is an emotional topic for lots of different reasons. And so until we uncover what's really important in their world, and instead we want to meet that with a practical conversation and talk at them, we have missed the connection and the ability to actually serve what's right in their needs.
And
So
again, here's another really good one where we lost an opportunity is because we came in, we thought there were opportunity gaps with the house and we were trying to be helpful, right? Hey, here's some stucco issues. Here's some things you got to fix in your house. Client got really angry because they weren't yet done going through the emotional activity and they didn't want to have any of the practical conversations. And again, that was just a complete misread of the situation because while we attempted to listen and we attempted to learn, we jumped too fast into what we thought the conversation should be, not meeting the person where they were.
and remember, this is your role to also understand if the person you're speaking with is someone you want to be in a 3 to 6 month relationship with, right? So it is equally fair for you to ask and uncover as it is for them to share and expect you to do the same with them. But what happens in real estate is they want to have an emotional conversation to get to the practical conversation, and we come at them with just practical. Your house is worth blah. Here's what the comps are. I don't care what you think. I don't care about this. I don't care that you've raised your babies here. This is how it is. This is how it must be. Sign here.
Most of it is done with the intention of attempting to be helpful.
But it actually is harmful because then when you actually have to have a conversation down the road about something else, maybe a price reduction, more time on the market, not meeting their goals, they become angry because they didn't have the opportunity to express what was really important and you didn't listen and understand and you made assumptions.
And Paige, how do you tie that in when you've listened and effectively you've listened again? How do you make sure that you're able to not talk about random things, right? Like we heard from a financial advisor, but how do you make sure you focus on what you've heard?
You illustrate it by saying something along the lines of, so it sounds like making sure your home is sold, not just under contract, but sold by July 1st is incredibly important because you need the proceeds of this house to put on the house that you're building in Michigan, and you need to be in Michigan before school starts. Is that right?
And Paige, that's brilliant because a label is, it seems like, it sounds like, it feels like. And that is the demonstration of tactical empathy to say, I feel heard. And especially for the high Ds, they will not progress until they feel heard. And so addressing the things that are important to them of component number 3. It sounds so easy, but there have been so many mistakes recently where just listening, and addressing those things would have saved a tremendous amount of heartache.
Because once I've said I understand your needs, then I can say, and they say that is exactly right, then it's very easy for me to say, okay, here's where I think the plan needs to be. How do you feel about this? And then we lay out what we're talking about. Here's our pricing structure. Here's this, here's this, here's this.
And when we look back over the last 18 months at the biggest blown opportunities and wasted time in front of the clients, the number one mistake is always coming back to we didn't hear, right? We didn't listen. And then we weren't actively labeling so the client felt heard. And specifically, again, we focus on what we think matters rather than what actually matters. And then the big other assumption is always assume you're starting with an emotional conversation until you get permission to move it to a practical one. Address the feelings before you get an opportunity to address the stucco or the price or anything else tactically that they have to do.
We've got 1 minute, and let me just add this before we finalize here. The reason why the emotional versus practical conversation is more important now than ever is because the market has shifted, and we have moved from a seller's market into a balanced and in many cases a buyer's market. Well, that seller is still reminiscing about the days when their neighbor sold in 2 days with 762 offers and $1 bazillion over list. And so they don't understand why that's not the market, and they're grieving through that. Or they don't know where the market's going, and they don't know how much they're going to be able to make on this house because they bought high in COVID and maybe the market hasn't moved up as much. So they're going through the emotional turmoil that we all had the privilege of walking through our buyers with when the buyers didn't win that first, second, third, fourth, or fifth offer. The times have just shifted. And so for the first time, many of us are having to have these conversations with sellers, and that takes skill and time to understand where they are in the emotional process. All right, we're at 9. We're going to hop. For those of you on the team, these are our upcoming team events. For anyone on this call that wants to join us just for additional conversations, we're going to be at a broker open house on May 1st if you want to join us just to talk all things real estate. Otherwise, happy Thursday. Happy vanilla icing. Hope everything goes well in your selling this weekend.